Okay, our learning is Le'ilin Nishmas Bintel Mariam Bas Kalman Ruven Her Neshama Shavan Aliyah. We are on Tzadi Hey Amud Aleph. We're at the words Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, so we're going to learn a couple of new halachos. Tanu Rabbanan Hacholev, one who milks an animal. Milking an animal on Shabbos is prohibited, which, by the way, gets into a very complicated issue where people own farms and they have cows that need to be milked because they're uncomfortable. And the question is, what could you do? There's some fascinating technology that they've developed in Israel, where they are able to attach certain machinery which basically goes on its own in order to alleviate the pain of the animals, and they're able to be milked. It's fascinating. Where I went to yeshiva, there was a farm next door, a kibbutz next door, which is a dati, a firm kibbutz next door, and you got to watch them how they were able to, I'm going to say bypass this, but basically take care of the animals in a way that was still in line with Shabbos. But to milk a cow is prohibited on Shabbos. Okay, there's actually, and very, very relevant, is that to pump, for a woman to pump her milk on Shabbos, not to nursing obviously is permitted, but to pump is highly problematic, and there's a whole, we have to ask a rabbi how to go about this if a person has to pump, but it's not so simple. Okay, it's a person who strains when milk basically is gets very chunky, and they basically would strain it and allow the whey to come through, the liquid to come through. And a person makes cheese. The measurement for all these things in order to be chayiv is kigro geres, the equivalent of a dried fig. Hamechabed, a person who sweeps the floor of a house. Now keep in mind, the floors of their homes were made of dust, were made of dirt, and so when you sweep it, you're actually making it smooth and straight. Hamarabe, it's a person who lays the dust. So basically what happens is in their homes, because it was a dirt floor, the dust would rise, and they would sprinkle water everywhere, and it would cause the dust to fall. We'll see what the issue with that is soon. Vaharode chalos tavash, a person who removes loaves of honey from a beehive. Shagag b'Shabbos chayiv chatas. If a person does this by mistake on Shabbos, then you're chayiv chatas. Hezeh b'yom tov lo karbam. If you did it deliberately on a yom tov, you get malchus. Okay, you don't get misa, but you get malchus. To Rabbi Eliezer, this is the words of Rabbi Eliezer. The Chacham say that all these things, or some of these things, some debate, but basically they disagree. They don't say that these things are deraisa, rather they are derabanan. Okay, Rav Nachman bar Guria Iklin, but again, nonetheless, us, our only question is if it's derabanan or deraisa. Rav Nachman bar Guria Iklin Harda Baumine, they asked of him, Choli Mishumai Mechayev, why is a person chayev for milking? Excuse me. Yes.
I don't want to watch on the TV because there's so much ads.
Yes, so give me 2 minutes, okay? I'll help you out. Okay? Just 2 minutes, okay? Okay. 2 minutes and then I can help you, okay? Amar lehu mishum cholev, okay? On account of milking, so he says, why are they chayiv for milking a cow? It's because of milking. Mechametz mishum mechayiv, why are you chayiv for straining milk? Amar lehu mishum mechametz, because of straining milk, okay? Megabin mishum mai mechayiv, what do you chayiv for when you make cheese? Amar lehu mishum megabin, for making cheese, right? This is you sound like you're talking to a wall. I'm asking what's the deeper reason behind it? And he's basically saying, this is the reason you're chayiv. Why is it usher? Because it's usher. That's what he seems to be saying. Amr lei, and therefore they say to him, Rabba katal kani be'agma have. Your teacher was a reed cutter in a swamp. It's a Talmudic insult, basically, who cuts reeds in a swamp? A swamp is filled with reeds. You just don't start cutting reeds down. Basically, your teacher was incompetent. Okay, Asa Shal b'midrasha. So you realize that Rav Nachman bar Goya realized, Taka, I don't have a good explanation for these things. He went to the base branch and they asked them. Amrullah, they said, milking a cow, you're liable, or a person really, you're liable for extracting. Mefarik, one of the 39 malachos. Mechabetz chai mishum borer, a person who strains the milk to get the liquidy part out is chai for borer. Borer is selecting. Megaben chai mishum bon, a person who makes cheese is chayav liable for building. Okay, mechaben maravitz baroda chalos tavash shagam shabbos chayav chatas. The rest of the brayso said, right, that if a person goes ahead and sweeps the floor or lays the dust, removes the loaves of honey, then if you do it by mistake on Shabbos, you're chayav chatas. Hezeh b'yom tov lo karbaim. To Rabbi Eliezer, if you do it on purpose on Yom Tov, you get 40 lashes. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer comes along and says, my time with Rabbi Eliezer. What's the reason for Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer is the Amora. Rabbi Eliezer is the Tana. So Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer says, what is the reason for Rabbi Eliezer's transgression, specifically about the honey? Why is taking a beehive, the honeycomb, considered? So why is it something which is Asr Midoraisa? Tichsev, he quotes a pasuk about Yonasan, the son of Shaul, and says, V'yitbolosa b'yara sedavash, and he dipped, I think it was a stick, he dipped it into the forest of honey. Okay, so basically, it's Yonasan goes ahead and he dips a stick into honey. But why is it called a forest of honey? Why does the Torah connect a forest to honey? To tell you, it's just like someone who detaches something from a forest on Shabbos, you're chayav chatas. To juxtapose and tell you that just like if you remove something from a forest, you rip something out from a forest, you're chayav chatas. So too, if you remove the honeycomb the loaves of honey from a beehive on Shabbos, you're chai v'chatos. Amemar shara zilcha, new thing. Continuation from the discussion before. Amemar shara zilcha b'mechoza. Amemar permitted sprinkling the floors to lay the dust in mechoza. Amar, he said, time my Amar Rabbanan, why did the rabbis say you can't lay dust on Shabbos? Again, keep in mind, even Rabbi Eliezer, and who said it's Chai Asr D'Oraisa, the Rabbanan said it's Asr Midrabanan. But what's the reason behind it? So even the Rabbanan said it's Asr to do, but what's the reason? Dilma As Lashvoye Gumos. The issue is that you sprinkle the water, it's going to cause the dust to settle, and some of the dust may fill up holes, right? And if you fill up a hole, that's a form of building. Hacha Leka Gumos, but over here in our floors, they're made of stone, right? So where he lived, there are stone floors, and therefore there's no issue of sprinkling and causing the dust to settle, because since they had stone floors, there's no issue of dirt floors that are being filled up, the holes being filled up, because they didn't have dirt floors, and therefore there's no isser that they could have, committed. Rava Tosva Ashkal Ravina to come and star Mehavla. Rava Tosva found Ravina one Shabbos in distress because of all the dust in his house. Okay, so there's dust flying everywhere. Varmalei Mark Shisha Bered Rav Ashkel Rav Ashi to come and star Mehavla. And some say it was Mark Shisha, the son of Rava, who found Rav Ashi in distress because of all the dust in the house. Amarle, he said to him, Lo Savarle Mar Lahad the Tanya Rose the Rabbit's base of Shabbos. So he says, don't you know the following brisa? The following brisa says a person wants to lay dust in their house on Shabbos. Maybe a revam le'amayim. Person's allowed to bring a basin full of water. V'rochitz panav zavizo, yadav zavizo, ragel zavizo. Go and wash your face in one corner of the house, your hands in another corner of the house, your feet in another corner of the house. And basically, going to be splashing water all over the place. You're not going to be, you get to water it directly is usher. But if you're doing it inadvertently, where you're washing your face, you're washing your hands, in each corner of the house, so basically what happens is water splashing everywhere. It's going to ultimately cause the dust to settle. That's the price that says that. So Amrullah said to him, Lavadatai, I forgot about it. Okay, Tana, Isha Chachama Mirabetzah space of Shabbos. The wife or daughter of a Torah scholar can lay the dust in her house on Shabbos. In other words, because she knows to do this shtick, this idea. She goes and she washes her hands or washes dishes in this corner, the cups in another corner, and basically in doing so, it causes water to spritz, and it causes the dust to settle. Okay, Va'inna, says the Gemara in conclusion, Shimon Shari Afil Lechatchila. Nowadays, since the Gemara ultimately paskins elsewhere that we rule like Rav Shimon, who holds the davar she'ena miskaven. When a person a person's allowed to do something, not when a person does one thing and their intention is for X, even though Y happens, it's permitted. So over here, if your purpose of lowering the dust is not to fill up the holes, your purpose is just lower the dust. It happens to be possibly while you do that, it's going to fill up the holes. It's not necessarily going to happen. That's number one. But B, it's also, and more importantly, it's not your intent. And since that's the case, therefore, since we pass the like Rav Shimon, and this is not your intention, then it is going to be permitted. Okay, that's the Gemara's conclusion. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Let's start the next Mishnah. Tolis me'atetz nakov, a person who plucks a plant from a perforated flower pot on Shabbos. Okay. So basically, you have a flower pot. It's sitting on the floor. It has a hole in it. So you can imagine that there's an argument to be made that it's drawing its nutrients from the ground since it has a hole in the bottom of it and it's lying on the ground. So if you pull a plant from this perforated flower pot, chayiv or chayiv for tolesh, for separating something on Shabbos. V'she'eino nakov, but if it's unperforated pater, you still shouldn't do it. But you are exempt. You're not actually pulling something from the ground. You're not going to be chai v'chatos. Rav Shimon, poter b'zeh. Rav Shimon, however, says you're pater in both cases. He clearly holds that even though it has a perforation, it's not considered attached to the ground. Rami le Abai l'Rav. Says the Gemara. Abai pointed a contradiction to Rav. Amri lo Rav Chia bar Rav l'Rav. Some say the contradiction was pointed out Rav Chia bar Rav to Rav. It's not. It was taught in the Mishnah. Rav Shimon poter b'zeh. Right. So Rav Shimon in our Mishnah says whether you pull it out from a non-perforated pot or a perforated pot, you're going to be pater since it's not considered attached. Clearly he holds that if it's perforated, it's the same as being unperforated. However, there's a contradiction. Rav Shimon Omer, the only legal difference between them is lahachshir zraim belvad. He holds that when it comes to seeds, what is he referring to? He's referring to preparing something to become tamei. In other words, when it's in order for something to be mekabel tumah, in order for something to become susceptible to tumah, it has to first have some water sprinkled on it or some liquid sprinkled on it. But that's only after it was detached. In other words, if some liquid falls on your cucumbers while they're on the ground, then they're not susceptible to tumah. If you detach them and no liquid ever fell on them, then they will not be susceptible to tumah. If you harvest the cucumber and then some liquid falls on it, then after that it now is susceptible to tumah, right? So it has to be detached and then liquid falls on it, it's going to be mekabel tumah. So it says Rav Shimon, the only difference between perforation and non-perforation is that when it comes to seeds, if it has perforation, it's still considered attached to the ground. Therefore, if like some liquid falls on it, it's not going to be Okay, there's not going to be it's not going to be susceptible to tuma. Okay, so you see clearly that in other areas, though, what does he hold? He holds that he says dafka over here, specifically over here, if it has a perforation, if it has a hole, it's considered attached to the ground. But normally, he says nowhere else. It says clearly. Normally, it doesn't make a difference whether there's a hole or not a hole. It's considered detached. But now he's telling us. Right, and yet we said above that he holds in all cases as detached. So what's going on? So Amrulay l'chol mili in all matters, Rav Shimon ketalosh m'shavile. Really, Rav Shimon in general treats a perforated pot as if it's detached. Okay, in other words, really, like we saw in our Mishnah, he holds it detached. V'shtayin l'tuma, when it comes to tuma, when it comes to making something susceptible to tuma, it's different. Atar ribsa tar etzel zraim, shnemer al kol zera zerua asher yizarei. So all the times it says zera, so there's some extra thing going on over here, telling us that as long as it's in any way considered attached to the ground, then it's not ready for tuma. But if it's in any way considered attached to the ground, then we treat it if it's attached to the ground, specifically in the context of hechsher l'tuma, specifically in the context of getting ready for tuma. But in all other cases, like we saw in our Mishnah, Rav Shimon says that whether it's perforated or not perforated, it's considered detached. Tuma is the one exception because the pasuk seems to emphasize that in any way if it's attached to the ground, it's going to not be susceptible to tuma. Have a great day.